The pounding on the door came just after midnight, and Clara Vaughn's heart lurched in her chest as she swept 3-month-old Thomas into her arms and tucked him deep inside her heavy woolen coat, pressing him against her chest where his warm breath dampened her nightgown. She had learned to move quickly in the past weeks since arriving in Helena, Montana in the autumn of 1882. Learned that hesitation could mean discovery, and discovery could mean losing the only thing in this world that mattered to her. The baby made a small sound, and she hushed him with a gentle hand, her pulse hammering as she approached the door of the tiny boarding house room she had rented with the last of her money. "Who is it?" she called out, keeping her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Sheriff's business, madam." "Open up." Clara's blood ran cold. She had known this day would come, had known that eventually her former in-laws would find her, would send someone to take Thomas away from her. They had never approved of their son marrying a poor farmer's daughter, and when Richard had died in a railroad accident 6 months into their marriage, leaving her pregnant and penniless, they had made their intentions clear. They wanted the baby, the heir to their considerable fortune, but they had no use for her. She opened the door just wide enough to see the sheriff, a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a salt and pepper mustache. Behind him stood a well-dressed man she did not recognize, his expression cold and calculating. "Mrs. Vaughn," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "This here is Mr. Pemberton, attorney from Boston. He says he has legal documents regarding your child." "I don't know what you're talking about," Clara said, her hand instinctively pressing against the lump beneath her coat where Thomas lay sleeping, his small form barely detectable in the folds of fabric. "I have no child." Mr. Pemberton stepped forward, his thin lips curling into something that was not quite a smile. "Mrs. Vaughn, we have witnesses who saw you traveling westward with an infant. The Harrington family has every right to their grandchild. Your husband's parents are prepared to offer you a settlement if you hand over the boy peacefully." "There is no boy," Clara insisted, though her heart was breaking. "You have been misinformed." The sheriff looked uncomfortable, his gaze darting between Clara and the attorney. "Madam, if you're hiding something, it'll only make things harder. These folks have the law on their side." "The law," Clara said quietly, "cannot take what is not here." Before either man could respond, a voice came from the shadows at the end of the hallway. "The lady said she has no child." "I suggest you gentlemen respect that and be on your way." Clara turned to see a tall figure emerging from the darkness, a man she had noticed around the boarding house in recent days but had never spoken to. He was lean and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty trail clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His movements were quiet, deliberate, like a wolf moving through the forest. "And who might you be?" Mr. Pemberton demanded, irritation sharpening his voice. "Name's Jack Morgan," the man said, his voice low and steady. "I'm a ranch hand working the bar I'm spread just outside town, and I'm also the lady's husband." Clara's eyes went wide with shock, but she had presence of mind enough not to contradict him. Jack Morgan met her gaze for just a moment, and she saw something there that made her catch her breath, a fierce protectiveness that she had not seen in anyone's eyes since her own father had died. "Her husband," Mr. Pemberton sputtered. "That's impossible. Our information clearly states she is widowed." "Then your information is out of date," Jack said, moving to stand beside Clara. He was so close she could smell leather and sage and something else, something clean and masculine that made her pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "We were married 3 weeks ago. Quiet ceremony, just the 2 of us and the preacher. If you'd like to verify that, you can check with Reverend Walsh at the Methodist Church come morning." The sheriff frowned, looking between them. "Is this true, madam?" Clara swallowed hard, feeling Thomas shift slightly against her chest beneath the coat. She had no idea why this stranger was lying for her, but she recognized the lifeline he was throwing her. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, it's true." Mr. Pemberton's face flushed red. "This is outrageous. I don't believe a word of it. Sheriff, I demand you search these premises." "On what grounds?" Jack asked, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge now, like a blade being drawn slowly from its sheath. "You have no warrant. You have no proof of anything except a woman and her husband standing in their own doorway in the middle of the night, being harassed by strangers." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "He's got a point, Mr. Pemberton. Without a warrant, I can't just go searching folks' rooms. And if they say they're married, well, that changes the legal situation considerably." "This is not over," Mr. Pemberton said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Clara. "The Harrington family will not give up their rights to their grandchild. We will be back with proper documentation." "You do that," Jack said calmly. "In the meantime, my wife and I would like to get some sleep. It's late, and we have work in the morning." The two men retreated down the hallway, and Clara heard their boots on the stairs, then the slam of the front door. She stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe, Thomas still hidden against her heart. Only when the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance did she finally turn to look at Jack Morgan. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. Jack studied her face in the dim lamplight, his eyes a deep brown that seemed to see right through her. "Because no one should have to hide their baby like that," he said simply. "Because I heard you crying through the walls 2 nights ago, and I heard you singing to him yesterday morning, and I figured you had your reasons for keeping him secret. Because those kinds of men, the ones who come in the dead of night with legal papers and cold eyes, they don't care about what's right. They only care about what they can take." Clara felt tears welling up, hot and sudden. "I can't pay you," she said. "I have nothing. I spent my last dollars on this room and food for the week." "I didn't ask for payment," Jack said, "but we do have a problem now. I just told them we're married, and that preacher I mentioned, he's a friend of mine. He'll back up the story if they ask. But if we're going to make this believable, you can't stay here. You need to come out to the ranch where I work. It's owned by a good man, Matthew Thornton. He and his wife Sarah have a big house and several hands working the property. There's a small cabin on the edge of the land that's been empty since the last foreman moved on. You could stay there. It would look proper, like a married couple setting up house." "But we're not married," Clara said, the absurdity of the situation hitting her. "We don't even know each other." "No," Jack agreed. "But we could be. Not for real, not unless you wanted. But for the sake of keeping your son safe, we could pretend. I don't need much, Mrs. Vaughn. I work hard, I keep to myself, and I don't expect anything from you beyond your agreement to this arrangement. When those men come back, and they will come back, they'll find a respectable married woman living on a working ranch with her husband. It'll be harder for them to make their case." Clara looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive, but all she saw was an earnest steadiness that made something in her chest loosen just slightly. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked again. Jack was quiet for a long moment. "I had a sister once," he finally said, his voice rougher now. "She got herself in trouble with a man who promised her everything and gave her nothing but grief. When she had the baby, his family tried to take it, said she was unfit. She fought them for a year, but they had money and lawyers and she had nothing. They took the child, and my sister, she never recovered. Died of a broken heart within 6 months. I couldn't help her then. But maybe I can help you now." Clara felt something crack open inside her, some barrier she had built around her heart to survive the past terrible months. "I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll pack your things and come with me in the morning," Jack said. Say you'll let me try to keep you and your boy safe." Thomas chose that moment to wake, his small cry muffled by Clara's coat. She reached inside and pulled him out, his tiny face scrunched up and red, his fists waving in the air. Jack's expression softened instantly as he looked at the baby. "He's a fine boy," he said quietly. "How old?" 3 months, Clara said, rocking Thomas gently. "His name is Thomas. Thomas Richard Vaughn." "Thomas," Jack repeated, and he reached out tentatively, letting the baby's small hand wrap around his calloused finger. "Well, Thomas, looks like you and your mama are coming to live on a ranch." "What do you think about that?" the baby cooed, his eyes focusing on Jack's face with that intense, unfocused stare that infants have. Clara watched the interaction, feeling something shift in her chest, something she could not quite name. "All right," she said softly. "We'll come with you. But Mr. Morgan, I need you to understand something. I will not be a burden. I can work. I can cook and clean and help however I'm needed. And whatever this arrangement is, I need to know that Thomas and I we are not obligating ourselves beyond what you've stated. I've been at the mercy of powerful people before, and I will not go through that again." Jack met her eyes directly. "You have my word, Mrs. Vaughn. This is purely to protect you and the boy, nothing more unless you decide otherwise. You'll have your own space, your own say in things. I'm just offering safety and a name that might keep those lawyers at bay." Clara nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision settling over her. "Then we have an agreement, Mr. Morgan." "Jack," he said, "if we're going to be married, even just for show, you should probably call me Jack." "Jack," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "And you should call me Clara." He smiled then, a slow, rare smile that transformed his serious face into something almost handsome. "Clara," he said, "get some rest. I'll come for you at dawn. Pack light, whatever you can carry. The ranch is about an hour's ride from town." "I don't have a horse," Clara said. "You can ride with me," Jack said. "I have a good, steady mare. She won't mind the extra weight, and we'll need to keep Thomas bundled up warm. It's getting colder these days." After Jack left, Clara sat on the narrow bed with Thomas in her arms, her mind spinning. She had come to Montana Territory hoping to disappear, to find some small town where she could raise her son in peace, away from the Harringtons and their cruel determination to take him from her. She had not expected this, had not expected a quiet cowboy with sad eyes and gentle hands to step in and offer her protection. She thought about Richard, her dead husband, who had been kind but weak, unable to stand up to his parents even when they had treated Clara with open disdain. She thought about the months after his death, the coldness of her in-laws, the legal letters informing her that they intended to claim custody of the baby once it was born. She had fled Boston when she was 7 months pregnant, taking only what she could carry, traveling by train across the vast country until she reached the Montana Territory, where she thought she might finally be safe. But safety, she was learning, was not a place. It was something you had to fight for every single day. She packed her few belongings that night, unable to sleep. The trunk Richard had given her as a wedding present held her 2 other dresses, Thomas's small collection of clothes and blankets, and the few precious items she had from her own childhood, a photograph of her parents, her mother's wedding ring, a book of poetry her father had loved. Everything else she had left behind in Boston. All the material comforts of the Harrington mansion traded for the freedom to love her own child. When dawn broke over Helena, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara heard the soft knock on her door. She had Thomas bundled in layers, his small face just visible within the nest of blankets. When she opened the door, Jack stood there with his hat in his hands, looking somehow both nervous and determined. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," Clara replied. Jack took her trunk, hoisting it easily onto his shoulder, and led her down to where his horse waited, a beautiful chestnut mare with intelligent eyes and a patient demeanor. He secured the trunk, then helped Clara mount, his hands gentle but sure as he lifted her into the saddle. She settled Thomas securely against her chest, and then Jack swung up behind her, his arms coming around on either side to take the reins. "Comfortable?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Clara nodded, too aware of his solid presence behind her, the strength in the arms that bracketed her body. They rode out of Helena as the town was just waking, past the bustling main street with its saloons and mercantiles, past the stamp mill that processed ore from the nearby mines, out into the open country where the land rolled away in golden waves of prairie grass beneath the endless sky. Jack kept the mare at an easy pace, and Clara found herself relaxing despite everything, lulled by the rhythm of the horse's gait and the warmth of the man behind her. Thomas slept peacefully, his small body trusting and content. "Tell me about the ranch," Clara said after a while, needing to break the silence. "The barn belongs to Matthew Thornton," Jack said. "He inherited it from his father about 5 years back. It's a good spread, about 2,000 acres of grazing land with a herd of about 500 cattle. Matthew and Sarah, they're good people, fair employers, kind hearts. They have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The oldest is about 7 now." "And the other ranch hands?" Clara asked. "There's 5 of us all told," Jack said. "Old Pete, he's been with the Thorntons since Matthew's father was alive. Then there's Carlos and his brother Louis. They came up from Mexico 3 years ago, best wranglers I've ever seen. And Danny, he's young, only 19, but he's learning fast. They're all good men. They'll be curious about you, but they'll be respectful." Clara bit her lip. "What will you tell them? About us?" "The truth, mostly," Jack said. "That we met in town, that we got married, that you needed a place to stay. The part about it being an arrangement just for appearance that can stay between us. Far as anyone else needs to know, we're a regular married couple." "Won't they wonder why we're living in separate quarters?" Clara asked. Jack was quiet for a moment. "The cabin has 2 rooms," he finally said. "A main room with a fireplace and cooking area and a bedroom. I'll sleep in the main room. You and Thomas can have the bedroom. That's what I was thinking anyway, if that suits you." "That's very generous," Clara said softly. "It's practical," Jack corrected. "Baby needs quiet to sleep, and I tend to rise early. This way we won't disturb each other." They rode on, and Clara found herself studying the landscape with growing appreciation. Montana Territory was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, so different from the manicured parks and crowded streets of Boston. Here the sky seemed to go on forever, and the mountains in the distance rose like ancient guardians, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "It's beautiful here," she said. "It is," Jack agreed. "It's hard country, though. Winters can be brutal and the work is never done, but there's a freedom to it that you don't find in the cities. A man can make something of himself out here if he's willing to work hard and honest." "Is that what you're trying to do?" Clara asked. "Make something of yourself?" Jack was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might not answer. "I don't know that I'm trying to make something of myself," he finally said. "I'm just trying to be someone I can live with. Someone my sister would have been proud of." Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I think she would be proud of you," she said quietly. "What you're doing for Thomas and me, that's not something many men would do." "Maybe," Jack said, "or maybe I'm just selfish. Maybe helping you helps me feel like I'm making up for the times I couldn't help her." Before Clara could respond, they crested a rise, and the Barham Ranch spread out before them. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Nearby stood a large barn, several outbuildings, and a series of corrals where horses moved restlessly. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and Clara could see figures moving around the yard, beginning the day's work. Jack guided the mare toward a smaller structure set a little apart from the main buildings, a neat cabin with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. "That's it," he said. "That's home, at least for now." He dismounted first, then helped Clara down, careful not to jostle Thomas. The baby had woken during the ride and was looking around with wide, curious eyes. Jack unlocked the cabin door and pushed it open, revealing a simple but clean interior. The main room had a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, a small cooking area with a cast iron stove, and a rocking chair near the hearth. A door in the back wall led to what Clara assumed was the bedroom. "It's not much," Jack said, setting her trunk down. "But it's sturdy and warm. I'll get a fire going, and then I need to go check in with Matthew, let him know what's happened. You can settle in, get comfortable. There's wood stacked on the porch, and the well is just behind the cabin. Water's good and cold." Clara looked around the cabin, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It was simple, yes, far simpler than anything she had known in her old life, but it felt safe. It felt like a place where she might finally be able to breathe. "It's perfect," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Jack built up the fire quickly and efficiently, and soon warmth began to fill the small space. He showed Clara where things were stored, the few dishes and cooking implements, the blankets in the bedroom, the lamp oil and matches. Then he paused by the door, his hat in his hands again. "I'll be back around midday to check on you," he said. "If you need anything before then, the main house is just across the yard. Sarah Thornton, Matthew's wife, she's a good woman. You can trust her." "Jack," Clara said, stopping him before he could leave. "Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but I need you to know how much this means to me, how much you're risking for people you don't even know." Jack met her eyes, and she saw something flicker in their depths, something warm and deep that made her breath catch. "I know you now, Clara," he said softly. "And I know that boy of yours. That's enough." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, and Clara was alone with Thomas in their new home. She sat in the rocking chair and nursed the baby, looking around the cabin and trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. Her life had changed so completely, so quickly, and she did not know if she should feel terrified or grateful or some combination of both. Thomas finished nursing and fell asleep in her arms, his small face peaceful and trusting. Clara held him close, breathing in his sweet baby smell, and made a silent promise. She would make this work. Whatever it took, however long she had to pretend, she would keep him safe. And Jack Morgan, this quiet cowboy who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even known how to speak, she would not let him regret his kindness. A knock on the door startled her, and she tensed, her hand automatically reaching to pull Thomas closer. But the voice that called out was feminine and warm. "Hello, Mrs. Morgan. I'm Sarah Thornton. May I come in?" Clara rose and opened the door to find a pretty woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and flour on her apron. She was holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I hope I'm not intruding," Sarah said with a smile. "Jack stopped by the house and told us the wonderful news about his marriage. I wanted to come and welcome you properly and bring you some breakfast. I imagine you've had quite a morning." Clara stepped back to let her in. "Thank you, that's very kind. Please come in." Sarah set the basket on the table and pulled back the cloth to reveal fresh bread, butter, a jar of preserves, and a covered dish that smelled like heaven. "It's nothing fancy, just some biscuits and gravy and some things from our pantry." I thought you might be hungry after your ride from town." "It smells wonderful," Clara said honestly. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Sarah's eyes went to Thomas and her expression softened. "Oh, what a beautiful baby. How old?" 3 months, Clara said, instinctively protective but sensing no threat from this woman. "May I hold him?" Sarah asked. "I promise I'm good with babies. I have 3 of my own." Clara hesitated only a moment before carefully transferring Thomas to Sarah's experienced arms. The older woman cooed at the baby, her smile radiant. "He's precious," Sarah said. "Such a good, quiet baby. You're very blessed." "I am," Clara said softly, feeling the truth of it despite everything. "More blessed than I have any right to be." Sarah looked at her with understanding eyes. "Jack didn't give us many details. Just that you two had married quickly, and that you might be facing some legal difficulties from back east. I want you to know that you're safe here. Matthew and we believe in protecting our own, and you're part of the Barham family now." Clara felt tears threatening again. "I don't know what to say. Everyone has been so kind, and I'm just a stranger." "You're Jack's wife," Sarah said simply. "That makes you family. And Jack, well, he's one of the best men I know. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but there's a strength in him. A goodness. If he chose you, then you must be someone special." Clara thought about correcting her, explaining that this was all an arrangement, a fiction created to protect Thomas, but something stopped her. Maybe it was easier to let people believe the story. Maybe it was safer that way. Sarah stayed for a while, chatting about the ranch and the area, giving Clara information about where to buy supplies in town, who the doctor was, which families were friendly and which to avoid. She also shared some of the history of the Barham, how Matthew's father had built it from nothing, how Matthew and Sarah had fallen in love when she came out from the East as a schoolteacher. "I understand what it's like to be new to this country," Sarah said as she prepared to leave. "It can be overwhelming, all this space and wildness after the cities back east, but you'll grow to love it, I think. There's something about Montana that gets into your blood." After Sarah left, Clara ate hungrily from the basket of food, then settled Thomas in a makeshift bed she created using blankets and her trunk in the bedroom. The room was small but cozy, with a real bed frame and mattress, a washstand, and a small window that looked out over the prairie. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses on pegs on the wall, arranging Thomas's things within easy reach. She was nursing Thomas again when she heard the door open and Jack's voice called out softly. "Clara, all right if I come in?" "Yes, of course," she called back. Jack appeared in the bedroom doorway, careful to keep his eyes averted while she was nursing. "Just wanted to check on you. Sarah said she stopped by." "She did. She was wonderful. She brought food and made me feel very welcome." "That's Sarah," Jack said with fondness in his voice. "She's got a heart big enough for everyone. Matthew wants us to come to dinner at the main house tonight if you're feeling up to it. Nothing formal, just family dinner. He wants to meet you properly." Clara's stomach clenched with nervousness. "Will there be questions? About us, about how we met?" "Probably," Jack admitted. "But nothing you can't handle. We met in Helena, we talked, we realized we suited each other, we got married. We can keep it simple. And if you don't want to answer something, you don't have to. These are good people, Clara. They're not going to interrogate you." "All right," Clara said. "What time?" 6 o'clock. "I'll come get you a little before." He paused, then added, "You did good today. I know this is all strange and sudden, but you're handling it well." "I don't have much choice," Clara said with a slight smile, "but thank you for saying so." Jack nodded and disappeared back into the main room. Clara heard him moving around, stoking the fire, doing small tasks. It was oddly comforting, having another person in the space, knowing she was not alone. That evening, Jack knocked on the bedroom door at 5:45. Clara had changed into her better dress, a deep blue wool that had been one of the few nice things she had brought with her. She had brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it up neatly, and she had dressed Thomas in his best gown, a white linen affair with delicate stitching. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Jack standing by the fire and her breath caught. He had cleaned up, shaved, changed into a fresh shirt and clean trousers. His dark hair was still damp from washing, and in the firelight he looked younger, more approachable, though still with that quiet strength that seemed fundamental to who he was. "You look nice," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with appreciation but respect. "So do you," Clara replied, then felt herself blush at the admission. They walked across the yard to the main house, and Clara was struck by how natural it felt to have Jack's hand at the small of her back, guiding her. The evening air was crisp and cold, and she held Thomas close inside her shawl. The Thornton house was warm and welcoming, filled with the sounds and smells of family life. 3 children came running when they entered, their faces bright with curiosity. Matthew Thornton was a big man with a ready smile and work-roughened hands that he offered to Clara with genuine warmth. "Welcome to the bar, Mrs. Morgan," he said. "We're real happy to have you and Jack here." Dinner was a lively affair, with the children chattering, Sarah serving dish after dish of hearty food and Matthew asking Jack about the day's work. Clara found herself relaxing despite her nervousness, drawn into the family's easy warmth. The other ranch hands had been invited too, and she met old Pete with his grizzled beard and twinkling eyes, Carlos and Louis, who treated her with courtly respect, and young Danny, who blushed every time she spoke to him. They asked about her, where she was from, how she and Jack had met, and Clara told the story they had agreed upon, keeping it simple and close to the truth where possible. She had been widowed young, had come west looking for a fresh start, had met Jack in Helena and felt an immediate connection. The lies felt uncomfortable on her tongue, but everyone seemed to accept them without question. It was old Pete who looked at her with knowing eyes and said quietly, "Sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them. You and that baby, you're going to be good for our Jack. He's been alone too long." Clara did not know how to respond to that, so she simply smiled and let the conversation move on. Thomas was passed around and admired, and Clara watched carefully to make sure he was not overwhelmed, but the baby seemed to enjoy the attention, cooing and gurgling at his admirers. After dinner, Sarah invited Clara to help with the dishes while the men retreated to the porch to smoke and talk. In the warm kitchen, with her hands in sudsy water, Sarah said gently, "You don't have to tell me the whole truth if you don't want to, but I can see you're afraid of something. If there's anything Matthew and I can do to help, you only need to ask." Clara's hands stilled in the water. "How did you know?" "I saw how you held that baby when you first arrived," Sarah said. "Like someone who's afraid he might be taken from you. And Jack, he has that look in his eyes like he's preparing for a fight. I've seen it before in men who are protecting something precious." Clara took a deep breath and made a decision. "Thomas's paternal grandparents want to take him from me. They have money and lawyers, and they've been trying to claim custody since before he was born. I ran to get away from them, but they found me in Helena. That's when Jack stepped in and claimed we were married. He's helping me, protecting us, even though he has no reason to." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her hands moving steadily through the dishes. "That sounds like Jack," she finally said. "He has a strong sense of right and wrong, that one. And a protective streak a mile wide, especially when it comes to women and children. His own sister died under tragic circumstances. Did he tell you that?" "He mentioned it," Clara said softly. "It changed him," Sarah said. "Before that, he was more open, more willing to let people in. After, he closed himself off. We were glad when he came to work for us, but we've worried about him being so alone. Maybe you and Thomas are exactly what he needs, just as much as you need him." Clara thought about that as they finished the dishes and rejoined the men. Jack caught her eye across the room and gave her a small smile, and she felt something warm unfold in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. They walked back to the cabin under a sky full of stars, Thomas sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms. The night was quiet except for the sound of their footsteps and the distant lowing of cattle. "They're good people," Clara said. "The best," Jack agreed. "You did well tonight. Very natural." "It felt natural," Clara admitted. "More natural than I expected." At the cabin, Jack lit the lamps while Clara put Thomas to bed. When she came back out into the main room, she found Jack spreading blankets on the floor near the fireplace. "You can't sleep on the floor," Clara protested. "You'll be miserable." "I've slept in worse places," Jack said. "Don't worry about me. There's a perfectly good bed in there that I'm not even using most of," Clara said. "It's big enough for two if we put pillows between us. This is ridiculous, Jack. You're doing so much for us already. I won't let you sleep on the floor in your own home." Jack looked at her for a long moment. "That wouldn't be proper." "Nothing about this situation is proper," Clara pointed out, "but it is practical. We're both adults. We can share a space without it meaning anything more than getting a good night's rest." Jack hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and comfort. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but if you're uncomfortable at any point, you just say so and I'll come back out here." That night, Clara lay in the darkness with Thomas in his little bed beside her, and Jack on the far side of the mattress with a wall of pillows between them, and she felt safer than she had in months. She could hear Jack's steady breathing, could sense his solid presence, and it comforted her in a way she had not expected. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Jack would rise before dawn and head out to work with the other hands, tending the cattle, mending fences, doing the 100 tasks that a ranch required. Clara would care for Thomas, clean the cabin, and gradually begin to venture out more, visiting with Sarah, helping with cooking for the ranch hands, making herself useful. She discovered that she liked the work, liked the feeling of being part of something larger than herself. Sarah taught her how to bake bread in the temperamental oven, how to preserve vegetables for the winter, how to mend the heavy canvas and leather that the cowboys used. The other women from neighboring ranches would sometimes visit, and Clara found herself slowly building a community, a network of friendship and support. Jack came home each evening tired and dusty, and Clara would have dinner waiting, simple meals that she learned to cook on the cast iron stove. They would eat together, talking about their days, and then Jack would play with Thomas while Clara cleaned up. The baby had begun to smile and coo, and his face would light up whenever Jack came near, his little arms waving with excitement. "He likes you," Clara said one evening, watching Jack lift Thomas high in the air while the baby squealed with delight. "I like him too," Jack said, bringing the baby down to nuzzle his neck. "He's a good little fellow, going to be strong, I can tell." Clara felt her heart squeeze watching them together. This was what Thomas deserved, she thought. A father figure who was gentle and kind, who made him feel safe and loved. Even if this arrangement was temporary, even if eventually the danger passed, and she and Jack went their separate ways, she was grateful that her son was experiencing this. 3 weeks after they had arrived at the ranch, a rider came from town with a message. Mr. Pemberton was back, and he had filed papers with the territorial court claiming that Clara was an unfit mother and demanding custody of Thomas be transferred to the Harrington family. Jack read the notice with a grim expression. "We need to get a lawyer. A good one." Matthew, who had come to the cabin when he heard the news, nodded. I know a man in Helena, Henry Blackstone. He's tough and he knows the law. I'll ride into town tomorrow and talk to him." "I can't afford a lawyer," Clara said, her voice shaking. "I have no money." "You let us worry about that," Matthew said firmly. "You're family now and we take care of our own." But Clara shook her head. "No, you've all done so much already, I can't ask for more." "You're not asking," Jack said quietly. "We're offering. Matthew's right. This is what family does." The lawyer, Henry Blackstone, was a shrewd man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. He came to the ranch to meet with Clara and Jack, asking detailed questions about their marriage, their living situation, and the Harringtons' claims. "The problem," he said bluntly, "is that your marriage to Mr. Morgan is very recent and appears, at least on paper, to be somewhat convenient given the timing. Mr. Pemberton is going to argue that it's a sham marriage designed solely to prevent the Harringtons from exercising their legal rights as grandparents." "It's not a sham," Jack said, his voice hard. "We're legally married." "But are you truly married?" Blackstone asked. "Or is this just a legal arrangement? Because if it's the latter and if that comes out in court, you'll lose. The judge will see it as fraud." Clara and Jack exchanged glances. "What are you suggesting?" Clara asked. "I'm suggesting that if you want to win this case, you need to be able to demonstrate a genuine marital relationship," Blackstone said. "You need to be able to show that you're building a life together, that this is a real marriage in every sense. Otherwise, the Harringtons will tear your case apart." After the lawyer left, Clara and Jack sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Clara said, "He's right. They're going to investigate us. They're going to talk to people, ask questions. If anyone suspects that this isn't real, we'll lose." "So we make it real," Jack said quietly. Clara looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean we stop treating this like a temporary arrangement," Jack said. "We act like a real married couple. We build a real life together, not just for show but actually commit to it, to each other." "Jack, that's asking too much," Clara stammered. "You didn't sign up for a real marriage. This was supposed to be just to help us." "Maybe it started that way," Jack said, turning to face her fully. "But Clara, these past few weeks living here with you and Thomas, it's been good. Really good. I know we haven't known each other long, and I know this isn't how people usually do things, but I think we could make this work. A real marriage, if you're willing." Clara's heart was pounding. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I care about you," Jack said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I care about Thomas. I like coming home to you in the evenings. I like the way you hum while you're cooking and the way you smile at me when I walk through the door. I like being part of something, being part of a family. I know I'm not the husband you probably imagined for yourself. I'm just a cowboy with no money and a hard past. But I promise you I would work every day to be a good husband and a good father to Thomas, if you'll have me, for real this time." Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Jack, I don't know what to say. This is so sudden." "It is," Jack agreed. "But sometimes the best things are sudden. Sometimes you just know. And I know that I want this. I want you and Thomas in my life. Not just to protect you, but because you make me happy. Because when I think about the future, I want you in it." Clara thought about the past weeks, about the way Jack had been so gentle with Thomas, so patient with her. She thought about the way he made her feel safe, the way his presence in the room could calm her anxieties. She thought about the way her heart had started to beat a little faster when she heard his step on the porch, the way she had found herself watching for him through the window as evening approached. "I care about you too," she admitted softly. "More than I thought possible in such a short time. But Jack, I need you to understand what you'd be taking on. The Harringtons, they're not going to give up. This could be a long fight. And Thomas, he's not your son. You'd be raising another man's child. Thomas is a baby who needs a father, Jack said firmly. And I would be proud to be that father. As for the Harringtons, let them come. We'll face them together. Clara made her decision. All right, she said. Yes, let's make this real. Let's be a real family. Jack's face broke into a smile and he reached out to take her hands in his. You mean it? I mean it, Clara said, smiling through her tears. Jack pulled her into his arms then, holding her close, and Clara felt something settle inside her, something that had been restless and afraid for so long. She was home. Finally, truly home. That night, after Thomas was asleep, Jack and Clara sat together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and talking. They talked about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Jack told her about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about losing his parents to disease, about his sister and the guilt he still carried. Clara told him about her childhood, about her loving parents who had died too young, about Richard and the mistake of marrying into a family that had never wanted her. I married him thinking it would be security, Clara admitted. My parents had died, I had nothing, and Richard seemed kind. He was kind in his way, but he was weak. He couldn't stand up to his parents, couldn't protect me from their cruelty. When he died, I grieved, but I also felt relieved. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. And then I found out I was pregnant, and everything changed. You don't have to feel guilty, Jack said gently. You did what you had to do to survive. That's not weakness, Clara. That's strength. I don't feel very strong, Clara said. You left everything you knew to protect your son, Jack pointed out. You traveled across the country alone while pregnant. You've been hiding and running and fighting to keep him safe. That's the definition of strength. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. What about you? Have you ever been in love before? Jack was quiet for a moment. Once. A long time ago. She was a girl from town, the daughter of the mercantile owner. I thought we were going to get married. But when her father found out I was just a poor farm boy with nothing to offer, he forbade it. She married someone else, someone with money and prospects. I was young and it hurt, but I got over it. Learned that love isn't always enough. Sometimes you need stability and security too. And now, Clara asked softly. Now I'm older, Jack said. I know that stability and security don't mean much if you're alone. I'd rather have a small cabin and a woman I care about than a big house and an empty heart. Clara lifted her head to look at him. In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows, strong and handsome and true. Kiss me, she whispered. Jack's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but then he smiled and cupped her face gently in his hands. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Clara felt warmth spread through her entire body, a feeling of rightness that she had never experienced before, not even with Richard. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy, he said quietly. I promise you that. You already do, Clara replied. The court hearing was scheduled for early November. As the date approached, Clara and Jack worked with Henry Blackstone to build their case. They gathered testimony from Sarah and Matthew, from the other ranch hands, from Reverend Walsh, who confirmed that he had married them. They documented their living situation, their finances, the community they had built around them. The key is to show that Thomas is thriving in your care, Blackstone explained. That he's healthy, happy, and well provided for. We need to demonstrate that removing him from this environment would be harmful to him, and that the Harringtons' claim is based on nothing more than their own desire to control the family legacy. The day of the hearing arrived cold and clear. Clara dressed Thomas in his best clothes and put on her nicest dress. Jack wore a suit that Matthew had lent him, looking uncomfortable but determined. They rode into Helena together in the ranch wagon, with Matthew and Sarah accompanying them for moral support. The courtroom was small and packed with people. The Harringtons had sent not only Mr. Pemberton but 2 other lawyers, all 3 of them looking confident and well prepared. Clara felt her stomach churn with anxiety, but Jack took her hand and squeezed it reassuringly. The judge was a stern-looking man named Hamilton, who surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes before calling the proceedings to order. Mr. Pemberton spoke first, laying out the Harringtons' case. He painted Clara as an unstable woman who had fled her responsibilities, who had entered into a suspicious marriage with a stranger, who could not provide the kind of life that the wealthy Harringtons could offer their grandson. This child is the heir to a considerable fortune, Pemberton argued. He deserves to be raised in a proper home, with education and culture, and all the advantages that his grandparents can provide. Mrs. Morgan, or Mrs. Vaughn as she was known, has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior and poor judgment. The marriage to Mr. Morgan is clearly a desperate attempt to avoid the Harringtons' legitimate custody claim. Then it was Henry Blackstone's turn. He called Matthew Thornton to the stand first, who testified about the Bar M Ranch, about Jack's character and work ethic, about the stability and community that Clara and Thomas had found there. "I've known Jack Morgan for 3 years," Matthew said. "He's one of the most honest, hard-working men I've ever met. When he brought Clara and the baby to the ranch, I could see he was committed to taking care of them. And Clara, she's fit in like she's always been part of our family. That baby is loved and well cared for. Anyone with eyes can see that." Sarah testified next, speaking about Clara's character, about how she had integrated into the community, about Thomas's health and happiness. "That child is thriving," Sarah said firmly. "He's growing well, he's happy, he's surrounded by people who love him. I have 3 children of my own, Your Honor. I know what a well-cared-for baby looks like, and Thomas is exactly that." Reverend Walsh testified about performing the marriage ceremony, confirming that both Clara and Jack had seemed sincere in their vows. Then Blackstone called Jack to the stand. Under questioning, Jack spoke clearly and calmly about his relationship with Clara, about his commitment to raising Thomas, about his plans for their future. "I know the Harringtons have money," he said. "I know they can offer material things that I can't. But Thomas doesn't need fancy clothes or a big house. He needs love. He needs a mother who would do anything to protect him, and a father who will work every day to provide for him and teach him right from wrong. That's what Clara and I can give him. That's what we are giving him." "But you're not his real father, are you, Mr. Morgan?" Mr. Pemberton interjected during cross-examination. "You have no blood tie to this child." "I'm the only father he's going to remember," Jack said steadily. "And blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Commitment does. Being there day after day, that makes a family." Finally, Clara took the stand. She spoke about her marriage to Richard, about the Harringtons' coldness and their threats to take her baby. She spoke about her decision to leave, about the terror of being alone and pregnant, about finding her way to Montana. "I know I'm not rich," she said, looking directly at the judge. "I know I can't give Thomas the material things the Harringtons can, but I can give him love. I can give him a home where he's wanted for who he is, not what he represents. I can give him a mother who will fight for him every single day, and a father who has already proven he'll do the same. The Harringtons never wanted me. They only want Thomas because he's their son's child, because they see him as property, as a legacy. But he's not property. He's a baby. He's my son, and I'm begging you not to take him from me." The courtroom was silent when she finished. Clara could see tears on Sarah's face, could see Matthew gripping his wife's hand. Jack was looking at her with such intensity, such open emotion, that it made her breath catch. The judge called for a recess while he considered his decision. The wait was agonizing. Clara sat in a small room with Jack and their lawyer, pacing and praying and trying not to let fear overwhelm her. Jack pulled her into his arms and held her, murmuring reassurances that she desperately wanted to believe. When they were called back into the courtroom an hour later, Clara felt like she might be sick. The judge looked at both parties, then cleared his throat. "I've considered the evidence and testimony presented here today," he said. "This is not an easy decision, but I must make it based on what I believe is in the best interest of the child. The Harringtons' lawyers have made much of their clients' financial resources and social position. But the law in Montana Territory recognizes that a mother's natural right to her child is paramount unless she is demonstrably unfit. I have seen no evidence that Mrs. Morgan is unfit. On the contrary, all testimony suggests that she is a devoted mother who has made significant sacrifices for her son's well-being." Clara felt hope beginning to bloom in her chest, but she was afraid to believe it. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the testimony of the Thorntons and Reverend Walsh convinces me that Mrs. Morgan's marriage to Mr. Morgan is genuine, and that they are establishing a stable home for the child. While the Harringtons may be able to offer material advantages, I do not believe that removing a 3-month-old infant from his mother and the home he knows is in his best interest, particularly when that mother is providing adequate care." Clara's knees went weak, and Jack's arm came around her waist, supporting her. "Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the Morgans. Custody of Thomas Vaughn Morgan will remain with his mother, Clara Morgan, and her husband Jack Morgan. The Harringtons' petition is denied." The gavel came down, and Clara felt like she could finally breathe again. She turned to Jack and threw her arms around his neck, tears streaming down her face. "We won," she sobbed. "We won." Jack held her tight, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "We did. He's ours. He's safe." Mr. Pemberton and the other lawyers were gathering their papers with tight expressions, but Clara could not bring herself to care. They had tried to take her son, and they had failed. Thomas was safe. Outside the courtroom, they were surrounded by well-wishers. Sarah hugged Clara tightly while Matthew clapped Jack on the back. Reverend Walsh offered his congratulations, and even some strangers who had been watching the proceedings stopped to express their approval of the judge's decision. On the ride back to the ranch, Clara held Thomas close and watched the Montana landscape roll by, feeling like she was seeing it with new eyes. This was home now, truly home, not because she was running from something, but because she was running toward something. Toward a life with Jack, toward a future for her son, toward happiness. That night, after they had put Thomas to bed and the cabin was quiet, Jack took Clara's hand and led her to the bedroom. "I know we've been taking things slow," he said softly, "but Clara, you're my wife now, for real. And if you're willing, I'd like for this to be a real marriage in every way." Clara felt her heart racing, but it was not fear, it was anticipation. "I'm willing," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "I'm your wife, Jack, in every way." What followed was tender and sweet. Jack's calloused hands gentle on her skin, his kisses reverent, his murmured words of love and reassurance making her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. This was what marriage should be, she thought. This partnership, this mutual care and desire and commitment. This was what she had never had with Richard, what she had not even known to want. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, Clara's head on Jack's chest, his arms around her. "I love you," she whispered. "I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other long, but I do. I love you." "I love you too," Jack said, kissing the top of her head. I think I have since that first night when I saw you hiding Thomas under your coat, so fierce and protective and brave. I knew then that I would do anything to keep you safe. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Clara's life. She and Jack settled into their marriage, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building a life together. Clara continued to help Sarah with various ranch tasks, and she started teaching some of the children in the area basic reading and writing, something she had learned from her educated mother. Jack worked hard on the ranch, but he always made time for Thomas, playing with the baby, teaching him to ride by putting him in the saddle in front of him while the horse walked slowly around the corral. Winter came to Montana, harsh and beautiful, and Clara learned what it meant to be a rancher's wife in this unforgiving country. She learned to keep the fire going through the night, to cook hearty meals that would sustain men working in freezing temperatures, to preserve and stretch resources when supplies were scarce. She learned the sound of the wind before a blizzard, the way the cattle would huddle together for warmth, the importance of community in surviving the brutal cold. On Christmas Eve, the whole ranch gathered at the main house for a celebration. Clara had helped Sarah prepare a feast, and Jack had carved a small wooden horse for Thomas, even though the baby was still too young to appreciate it. The children sang carols, Matthew read from the Bible, and Clara felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this family that had taken her in and made her one of their own. As winter gave way to spring, Clara began to suspect that she might be pregnant again. She waited to be sure before telling Jack, but when she finally did, his face lit up with such joy that it made her laugh and cry at the same time. "Another baby," he said, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see that he was. "Happier than I've ever been," Jack said, pulling her close. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A wife, a son, a family, and now another child. How could I be anything but happy?" The pregnancy was easier than her first had been, perhaps because she was not alone and terrified this time. Sarah gave her advice and support, and Jack was incredibly attentive, taking on more of the household tasks as Clara's belly grew. Thomas was walking now, a sturdy toddler who followed his father around like a shadow, and Jack was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about the animals and the land. In late August of 1883, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James, after Jack's father, and his arrival brought even more joy to the cabin. Thomas, now almost a year and a half old, was fascinated by his little brother, always wanting to help with him, to bring him toys, to tell him stories in his garbled toddler language. Clara watched her two sons and her husband, watched the way Jack was so gentle with both boys, the way he treated Thomas exactly the same as James, never showing any difference or favoritism. She had been right to trust him, right to take the leap of faith that had brought them together. The Harringtons made one more attempt to claim Thomas when he was 2 years old, sending lawyers with new petitions and arguments. But by then, Jack and Clara had been married for more than 2 years, had built an undeniable life together, and had a second child together. The judge dismissed the case without even a hearing, noting that Thomas was clearly thriving with his parents, and that continued legal action constituted harassment. After that, the Harringtons finally seemed to give up. Clara heard through distant channels that they had begun to reconcile themselves to the loss, that Richard's mother had taken ill and his father had grown frail. She felt a small pang of sadness for them, but she could not regret her choices. Thomas was where he belonged, with people who loved him for himself, not for what he represented. As the years passed, the Morgan family grew. After James came a daughter they named Sarah after their dear friend, then another son named Matthew, and finally another daughter, little Elizabeth. The cabin became too small, and with Matthew Thornton's help, Jack built an addition, expanding it into a proper house with 4 bedrooms and a large kitchen. Jack eventually became foreman of the Bar M Ranch, a position of respect and responsibility that came with a better salary and more authority. He was good at it, respected by the other hands, trusted by Matthew. Clara became known in the community as a skilled teacher, and she held informal classes for children in the area several times a week, teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. Thomas grew into a fine young man, smart and kind and strong. He knew that Jack was not his biological father, but he never called him anything but Pa, and the bond between them was as strong as any blood tie could be. He learned ranching from Jack, learned to ride and rope and tend cattle, but he also had his mother's love of books and learning. When he was 18, he went east to attend college, something that would have been impossible without Jack and Clara's support and savings. The other children thrived too. James became a skilled horseman and eventually started his own horse breeding operation on land adjacent to the Bar M. Sarah married a young doctor who came to Helena and set up practice, giving Clara and Jack their first grandchildren. Matthew took over as foreman of the Bar M when Jack finally retired, and Elizabeth, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher like her mother, eventually opening a proper school in Helena. On a warm summer evening in 1902, 20 years after that frightening knock on the door in Helena, Clara sat on the porch of their house with Jack, watching the sun set over the Montana prairie. Their hair was streaked with gray now, their faces lined with the years, but their hands were still clasped together, fingers intertwined. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked softly. "Taking us in that night, tying your life to mine?" Jack turned to look at her, his eyes still as deep and warm as they had been 2 decades before. "Not for a single second," he said firmly. "Best decision I ever made was claiming you as my wife. Best thing that ever happened to me was you and Thomas walking into my life." "I was so scared that night," Clara remembered. "Hiding Thomas under my coat, thinking I was going to lose him, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I didn't even know how to speak." "I heard you crying," Jack said, "through the walls, and I heard you singing to him the next morning. And I thought about my sister, about how no one had protected her when she needed it. I couldn't let that happen again." "You saved us," Clara said simply. "We saved each other," Jack corrected. "I was so alone before you, going through the motions of living but not really living at all. You gave me purpose. You gave me family. You gave me love." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as their youngest daughter Elizabeth rode up on her horse, her face flushed and happy from an afternoon ride. She waved to them before heading to the barn to tend to her mount. "5 children," Clara said with a soft laugh. "Can you believe it? When I was hiding Thomas under my coat, terrified I would lose him, I never imagined I would end up with 5 children and a whole house full of grandchildren. And more to come, I expect," Jack said with a smile. "James's wife is expecting again, and I hear Matthew's been courting that young woman from town pretty seriously." "We're blessed," Clara said, leaning her head on Jack's shoulder. "So very blessed." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the cold mansion in Boston where she had never belonged, through the terror of flight and hiding, to this warm home in Montana where she had found everything she never knew she needed. She thought about that first knock on the door, the fear that had gripped her heart, and the quiet cowboy who had stepped forward and said, "No one's taking him." Jack had kept that promise. He had protected Thomas, protected her, built a life with them that was rich in love and joy and purpose. Their marriage had started as a fiction, a story told to keep predators at bay, but it had become the truest, deepest relationship of Clara's life. Jack was her partner in every sense, her lover, her friend, her co-parent, the person she turned to in joy and sorrow, the steady presence that anchored her through every storm. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, his arm coming around her shoulders. "Everything," Clara said. "The past, the present, how lucky we are, how much I love you." "I love you too," Jack said, kissing her temple. "Every day more than the day before." Thomas came riding up then, home from his work in town where he practiced law, having followed in Henry Blackstone's footsteps. He was 31 now, married to a wonderful woman named Anne with 3 children of his own. He dismounted and came up onto the porch, his face breaking into a smile when he saw his parents. "Evening, Ma, Pa," he said, settling into a rocking chair. "Beautiful night." "It is," Clara agreed, looking at her eldest son with pride. "How was your day?" "Good. Settled that property dispute for the Hendersons, and I think I've got a lead on that mining claim case I've been working on." He paused, then added, "I stopped by the telegraph office, heard some news. My grandmother in Boston passed away last week." Clara felt a complex mix of emotions. The Harrington matriarch had been her enemy for so long, but she was still Thomas's grandmother. "I'm sorry," she said gently. Thomas shrugged. "I never knew her." "Never wanted to, not after everything you told me about how they treated you. But I thought you should know. The lawyer handling the estate sent a telegram. Apparently, she left me something in her will. A substantial sum, actually. I guess she never entirely gave up on claiming some connection to me, even if it was only through money." "What will you do with it?" Jack asked. "Put it toward the children's education," Thomas said. "Same thing you and Ma did for me." "That's the only good thing that can come from that family, making sure the next generation has opportunities." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. This was the man she and Jack had raised, someone who valued family and education and opportunity over bitterness and resentment. "You're a good man, Thomas," she said softly. "I had good examples," Thomas replied, looking at both his parents with affection. "Everything I am I owe to you too. You know that, right? We were just doing what parents do," Jack said gruffly, but Clara could see he was moved. "No," Thomas said firmly. "Pa, you didn't have to do anything. You could have walked past that boarding house room and never looked back. But you didn't. You stepped in, you claimed us, you made us your family. That's not what just any man would do. That's what a hero does." Jack looked uncomfortable with the praise, but Clara squeezed his hand. Thomas was right. Jack was a hero, her hero, and she would spend the rest of her life being grateful for his courage and kindness. As the evening deepened and Thomas went inside to help his wife with dinner preparations for the family gathering they had planned, Clara and Jack remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and the comfortable silence of long companionship. "You remember what you said that first night?" Clara asked. "When you told the sheriff you were my husband." "I said a lot of things that night," Jack said with a slight smile. "You said my wife," Clara reminded him, "like it was already true, like there was no question about it, even though we were strangers." "Maybe we were strangers in one sense," Jack said thoughtfully. "But in another sense it felt right from the beginning, like I had been waiting for you without knowing I was waiting, like you were meant to walk into my life and change everything." "I felt it too," Clara admitted. "Even through the fear, even through the desperation, there was something about you that made me feel safe. Something that made me want to trust you." "And do you?" Jack asked, turning to look at her in the fading light. "After all these years, after everything we've been through, do you still trust me?" "With my life," Clara said without hesitation. "With our children's lives, with everything. You're the best man I've ever known, Jack Morgan." Jack pulled her closer, and they watched the stars emerge one by one in the vast Montana sky. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family gathering, children laughing, the clatter of dishes, the warm murmur of conversation. This was what they had built together, this life, this family, this legacy of love and protection and unwavering commitment. Clara thought about that frightened young woman hiding her baby under her coat, terrified of every knock at the door. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that it would all be okay, that a quiet cowboy would step forward and change everything, that she would find not just safety but joy, not just protection but partnership, not just a home but a whole life worth living. But maybe, Clara thought, that woman would not have believed it. Maybe some things you had to live through to understand, some happiness you had to earn through trial and fear, and the courage to trust when trust seemed impossible. Jack had given her that gift, the gift of trust rewarded, of faith justified, of love that grew deeper with every passing year. He had said no one would take Thomas, and he had meant it, had backed those words with action and commitment that lasted not just days or weeks but decades. He had become not just a protector, but a true father, not just a convenient husband but a beloved partner. As they finally rose to go inside and join their family for dinner, Clara looked back at the quiet prairie, at the land that had become home, at the big sky that had witnessed all their joys and struggles. Montana had given her everything she had run toward and everything she had not known to hope for. It had given her Jack, and Jack had given her the world. That night, after all the children and grandchildren had gone home or to bed, Clara and Jack lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, the room that had seen so much of their life together unfold. Jack's arm was around her, her head on his chest, the steady beat of his heart a rhythm she had grown to depend on. "I'm glad you knocked on that door," Clara whispered. "I didn't knock," Jack said with amusement. "The sheriff and that lawyer knocked. I just showed up and lied through my teeth." "Best lie you ever told," Clara said. "Best truth I ever lived," Jack corrected. "Because it became true, didn't it? We made it true." "We did," Clara agreed. "We made it all true. The marriage, the family, the love, all of it." "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," Jack said. Every single moment, every challenge, every fear, all of it was worth it to end up here with you. "I love you, Jack Morgan," Clara said, lifting her head to kiss him softly. "I love you, Clara Morgan," Jack replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after. You and our children, you're my whole world." Clara settled back against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. This was peace, she thought. This was what it meant to be truly home. Not a place, but a person. Not walls and a roof, but arms that held you and a heart that chose you every single day. Outside, the Montana wind whispered through the prairie grass, and the stars shone down on the little house where a family slept safe and loved. The journey that had begun with fear and hiding had led to this, to generations of children who would never know what it meant to be unwanted, to decades of partnership and love, to a legacy that would outlast them both. Clara had hidden her baby under her coat at every knock, terrified of losing him, and a quiet cowboy had said, "No one's taking him." Those words had changed everything, had set in motion a life neither of them could have imagined that night in Helena. Those words had become a promise kept, a vow honored, a love story written across the wild Montana landscape. As sleep claimed her, wrapped in Jack's arms and surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Clara's last thought was one of profound gratitude. For courage found in desperate moments, for strangers who became family, for love that bloomed unexpected and true, for a quiet cowboy who had stepped forward when she needed him most and had never stepped back. Their story had started with fear and ended with joy. And in between, they had built something beautiful and lasting and true. They had built a life. They had built a family. They had built a love that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of choosing to protect, to commit, to love without reservation. The baby she had hidden under her coat was now a man with children of his own. The cowboy who had claimed to be her husband had become the truest partner she could have imagined. And the life she had fled to in desperation had become the life she would choose again and again, every time without hesitation. In the darkness of the Montana night, in the warmth of their shared bed, in the peace of a life well lived and a love well earned, Clara and Jack slept. And their story, which had begun with a knock at the door and a desperate lie, lived on in truth and joy and the unbreakable bonds of family. The years continued to roll by in their steady progression, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Clara and Jack grew old together, their love deepening with the kind of intimacy that only comes from sharing thousands of ordinary days and extraordinary moments. They celebrated births and mourned deaths. They weathered financial hardships and celebrated successes. They held each other through illness and danced together at their children's weddings. When Jack was 65, he finally fully retired from ranch work, though he could never quite give it up entirely. He still rose early most mornings to check on the horses or walk the property, still knew every inch of the bar as well as he knew Clara's face. Matthew Thornton had long since passed on, leaving the ranch to his son, and Sarah had followed him a few years later, but the connection between the Morgans and the bar remained strong. Clara continued teaching until she was well into her 60s, only stopping when her eyes grew too weak to read the small print in books. Even then, she would tell stories to the grandchildren, passing on the history of their family, making sure they understood the courage and love that had built the foundation they stood on. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that brought together nearly 100 people, family and friends from across Montana. Thomas gave a speech that had everyone crying, talking about the parents who had shown him what real love looked like, what sacrifice and commitment meant. He spoke about hiding under his mother's coat as a baby, about the man who had stepped forward to claim them, about the family that had been built on courage and kindness. "My father," Thomas said, looking directly at Jack, "is not the man who gave me life. But he is the man who gave me everything else. He's the man who taught me how to ride and how to treat a lady with respect. He's the man who sat up with me when I had nightmares and who celebrated every one of my accomplishments like they were his own. He's the man who showed me that family is not about blood but about choice, about showing up every day and doing the work of love." Jack, who had never been comfortable with attention or praise, had tears running down his weathered cheeks. Clara held his hand and added her own tears to his, overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built together. As they grew older still, their children and grandchildren made sure they were cared for with the same devotion they had shown. When Jack's health began to fail in his 75th year, it was Thomas who moved his parents into his large house in Helena so they could be near the doctor and have constant care. Clara never left Jack's side during those final months, holding his hand, reading to him, reminding him of all their years together. "No regrets," Jack whispered to her one evening as the sun set outside the window. "Not a single one." "Me neither," Clara said, kissing his forehead. "You gave me everything, Jack, everything. You gave me a reason to live," Jack said. "A reason to be better than I was. You and Thomas and all our babies, you made me into the man I wanted to be." Jack passed peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1907, with Clara beside him, and all their children gathered in the house. Clara held him until he was gone, whispering her love, thanking him for 45 years of partnership and devotion and unwavering commitment. The grief was profound, but so was the gratitude. Clara had lost her partner, but she had decades of memories to sustain her and a family that surrounded her with love. She lived for another 8 years, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren arrive, passing on stories and wisdom and the legacy of love that she and Jack had built together. When Clara died in 1915 at the age of 72, she was surrounded by family, her hand held by Thomas, her children and grandchildren filling the room. Her last words were, "Tell Jack I'm coming. Tell him I love him. Tell him no one's taking our babies now." They buried her next to Jack in the cemetery overlooking the prairie they had both loved, and the headstone read, "Clara Morgan, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she loved fiercely and was loved in return." The story of Clara and Jack became legend in their family, passed down through generations. The tale of the frightened young mother hiding her baby, the quiet cowboy who stepped forward to protect them, the love that grew from desperate circumstances into something beautiful and lasting. Their descendants multiplied across Montana and beyond, and every one of them knew the story of how it all began. The cabin where they had first lived together was preserved by the family and eventually donated to the Montana Historical Society as an example of pioneer life. The letters Clara and Jack had written to each other during their courtship and marriage were archived, providing historians with a vivid picture of life in the Montana Territory during those early years. But more than physical artifacts, Clara and Jack's true legacy lived on in the values they had instilled in their children and grandchildren. The importance of protecting the vulnerable, the power of choosing love over fear, the truth that family is built not just by blood but by commitment and sacrifice, and showing up every single day. Thomas became a respected judge and lived to be 83, always keeping a photograph of Clara and Jack on his desk. In interviews late in his life, he would speak about his parents with reverence and love, crediting them with teaching him everything that mattered about justice, compassion, and the courage to do right even when it was hard. "My mother could have given up," he told a newspaper reporter on his 80th birthday. "She could have let fear win, but she fought for me with everything she had. And my father, who had every reason to walk away from someone else's problems, chose to step forward instead. Together, they showed me what it means to be truly brave, truly loving, truly committed. Everything good in my life I owe to them." The story of the knock at the door, of the baby hidden under a coat, of the quiet cowboy who said, "No one's taking him," became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of human kindness, to the possibility of love finding us in our darkest moments, to the truth that sometimes the family we choose is every bit as real as the family we're born into. In the end, Clara and Jack's story was a simple one, but simple did not mean insignificant. It was the story of two people who found each other when they needed each other most, who built a life together one day at a time, who loved fiercely and faithfully until death parted them. It was the story of courage and commitment, of protection and partnership, of a love that started as a desperate lie and became the truest thing either of them ever knew. And somewhere in the Montana sky, under the stars that had witnessed it all, their love lived on, eternal and unbreakable, a quiet testament to the power of showing up, stepping forward, and saying to the frightened and the vulnerable and the desperate, "I've got you. No one's taking what's yours. You're safe now, you're home,